So hello everyone and welcome to the first webinar of GLASE's 2022 series. I'm Haley Rylander. I'm the Extension Support Specialist at GLASE, the Greenhouse Lighting and Systems Engineering Consortium. And we will be hosting 10 of these webinars in this year. And we already have a great lineup of CEA industry experts and a lot of roundtables we're going to be having. So make sure you stay tuned for more information on that, which will be going out in our newsletters, our social media, and all sorts of things like that. Before we start with the webinar, I would like to extend a huge thanks to our current GLASE industry and CEA members for their support. It's because of them that we can promote these activities and offer them to a wide range of audiences. So let's start today's presentation. I encourage all of the attendees today to make sure you use the Q&A box that's at the bottom of your screen. So throughout the presentation, you can submit your questions there. Please submit them there and not in the chat. And these questions will be addressed at the end of the webinar. This webinar is also being recorded, and the recording of that will be available on the GLASE website in the next few days. Now, I would like to introduce our speaker for today, Dr. Jinhua Niyu. Dr. Niyu is a professor at Texas A&M AgriLife at Dallas. She joined Texas A&M AgriLife Research at El Paso Center in 2004 to research urban landscape, water conservation, and salinity and drought tolerance of horticultural crops. Her current research focuses on specialty crop production in urban controlled environments. And today she will be talking about CEA research and extension at Texas A&M AgriLife at Dallas. So thank you so much, Dr. Niyu, for joining us today. And I'm going to go ahead and hand things over to you.
Okay, let me share my screen. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, looks good.
Okay, let's see now. Oh, actually didn't move forward and okay, oh, that's okay now. Let me put using my pointer. Okay, this is the second slide, right? You can see.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for the invitation. And this is a great honor to share our CEA activity team information and research results. So today I will be giving 3 topics. First, I would like to briefly introduce our CEA team in Texas A&M, and then I will share research results on 2 of our recent last 2 years project. And the first one is pre-harvest supplemental lighting on greenhouse lettuce growth and nutritional quality. And then wanted to share the results on the light spectrum effect on indoor microgreen growth and quality. So at Texas A&M, we have 13 research and extension centers across the state. As you can see, those star symbols, those are the research and extension center with significant faculty and staff. And then some of them have horticulture programs. And for the CEA program, the largest center is Dallas Center. And at Dallas Center, we have myself and Dr. Zahid and Dr. Masabani. And then in College Station, which is the main campus, we have Dr. Su-Yan Chen, who actually already giving twice presentation, I think in your webinar series in the last 2 years. So she will be doing research and teaching in CEA, and she joined us in 2020 August, I believe. And then in Uva Center, Dr. Daniel Laskova is a plant physiologist, and he's also doing some CEA work. For example, the different kinds of variety trials in different how to manage things, and he also does research in transplant production using biostimulants. And down the valley, Dr. John Jifan also started the CEA research in aquaponics and hydroponics, I believe, a few years ago. So these are the Texas A&M team, and today I was just focusing on the Dallas Center, the activities. So in Texas, because we are in the southern part, and so our challenges in CEA crop production and opportunity would be slightly different from northern state like New York. Because we have a mild winter and we have more sunny days, more natural light. So in winter time, our heating cost and supplemental lighting cost would be lower. So this is good for developing greenhouse productions. And also, if you look at the population increase in the last 2 decades, you will see in southern states, we have more than 20% increase. And especially in Texas, we have many larger cities and larger population. So this is a great potential market for indoor farmings and for developing for urban agriculture. And like many other parts of the country and worldwide, the increasing interest in locally grow fresh produce, and that can be met by all kinds of CEA production systems. But we do have challenges. For example, the high temperatures and high humidity during summertime, that would make it very difficult for us to control the greenhouse temperature to cool down to optimal level. Sometimes it's very difficult in full summer. And because of that, we also have seen high incidence of pests and disease, and especially for long-term crops like tomatoes and cucumbers, that's going to last a few months. And of course, if you are just growing leafy greens in summer season, then it would be the disease and the pest problem would be much less severe, because also you can, for those crops, you can harvest earlier. You don't have to wait for the mature size. So that's good. So because of those increasing demand and the increase, also the interest in CEA industry, and Texas A&M also realized that the importance. So a few years ago, they wanted to establish urban controlled environment research program, research and extension program. And we first started in Dallas Center, and Dr. Zahid joined us actually 6 months ago, and he is the engineer, and he's in Dallas Center. His specialty is artificial intelligence and automation solutions to address engineering needs for CEA. And his research focuses on developing AR-based prediction models for sustainable crop production solutions. For example, to use that technology to do scouting and to do modeling, yield estimation. And he's also developing autonomous robotic systems to reduce the labor dependence, which is very important if we wanted to scale up CEAs either in a greenhouse or in an indoor farming situations. And he's also developing other automations, for example, automatic irrigation controls, either using wireless sensors or wired sensors, during developing that kind of network and hardware and software to ease the control. And we have the extension specialist, Dr. Joe Masavini, who is the main organizer for our annual Urban Controlled Environment Conference since 2019. And we have seen increased demand for such kind of trainings or conference. Really once a year is not enough. So we are in an effort to apply for fundings. Hopefully, if we are lucky, we can increase more frequently with different kind of training courses, short courses in the future. So his program is focusing on different kinds of hydroponic systems, nutrient management, and like suitable crops and those kind of things, and mainly for education and demonstration. And he also collaborates with me on the research side. and also including vertical farmings, like how to grow microgreens and how to manage the light and temperatures. And high turnover actually is another part that we include as in our CEA program, even though it is a semi-controlled environment, but for southern states and high turnover actually in the fall and in the spring can have a much longer growing period compared to the northern states. And also Dr. Masabini, he has aquaponic extension program from a few years ago. And of course, the urban gardening is another important part for urban agriculture. As for the facility at Dallas Center, we have about like 12 greenhouses. These are kind of old, and this is not the best picture. But we do have new greenhouses, which is built on the rooftop, semi-rooftop, I would say. And so these are 3 years old and not large enough. It is good for very good temperature control because the greenhouse uses the building's AC system to control the temperature. However, the size and also because it's the semi rooftop nature, so there's some shading in the other 2 greenhouses like here. So we realized that problem, and we right now we're actually in the process of building new greenhouses. And because high turnover is important, so we are also adding new high turnovers. So hopefully soon we're gonna have more greenhouse for CEA program. And so far we use these shipping containers for our research as a growth chambers. So research in my lab, I do research mainly in the greenhouse crop production and indoor farming. As we stated about the challenges, so we realized the importance of how could we develop technologies and informations for low input technologies, such as could we control the rootstone temperature instead of the entire greenhouse. For example, in the summer, since we using the regular cooling system plus the shading, we cannot reach the optimal temperature. Then how about we control the rootstone close to the optimal temperature, and that probably would extend the cool season leafy greens further and would enhance the quality. And similarly, in winter situation, instead of control the entire greenhouse like today, it is cloudy and very cold, below freezing. And then if you wanted to control the greenhouse to the optimal, then you really have to have a large capacity of a heating system. And even so, it is very costly. And so we are looking at strategies by having a relatively lower air temperature set point, and then control the root zone to close to optimal temperature. This way, we can reduce the heating cost, but we still can produce a range of crops with acceptable quality and yield. So another project that I will be sharing today is the low input supplemental lighting strategies for greenhouse crop production. Since for greenhouse supplemental lighting is very costly, and we wanted to know if we can use short-term lighting to boost the quality. And if it is okay, then what about the most inexpensive LED fixture? What's the lighting recipe that we can use that would not cost too much? And then for the indoor farming research that we have done, different kinds of spectrum from UV to all the way to far red, and the lowest DLI for acceptable quality and yield. And so far, we actually already have that answer for many leafy greens. And then I'm also collaborating with Dr. Masabini on different kinds of hydroponic system. We wanted to develop informations, suitable crops and cultural protocols and information so that the industry can use directly. And then the most recent one project in CEA is how could we use biostimulants in CEA crop production. One example is how could we produce resilient transplant or seedlings in the greenhouse or in indoor farm to prepare those small young plants with resilience, with resistance to both abiotic stress and biotic stress, and so that they can jump up and have a high initial growth and also less transplanting shock. So first topic today's research results sharing is the pre-harvest supplemental lighting on greenhouse production. We have heard that from many industry stakeholders and even colleagues, they kind of have the question, in Texas, do you still need a supplemental lighting? They think that in the southern states, probably we have enough light. So to answer this question, we can look at the DLI map. So this is the winter from November to February, outdoor DLI. As you can see that in Texas, the DLI actually is between 15 to 30 more per day. And inside the greenhouse, usually down to about half because of all the structures and depending on how old your greenhouse is. But from our measurement in our both the rooftop new greenhouse and also the old greenhouse, about half the DLI of outdoor. So as we know that from this table that we know the minimal DLI for leafy green like lettuce is about 12 mole and then optimal is 17. So apparently in Texas winter, we do need supplemental lighting if we wanted to keep the productivity and keep the quality. Then the problem is, of course, even in Texas, supplemental lighting is very costly. Imagine you needed to have the fixtures and also the electricities that are going to increase the production cost. And the supplemental lighting from the beginning of a crop cycle may not be a cost-effective approach for many crops. As you can see from these photos that if you add a supplemental lighting and when the plants are small, a lot of photon, a lot of lights gonna land to the empty space, which is a waste. And we also heard from our local growers that they could not produce purple or red leaf lettuce, and which is actually one of the essential important for mixed greens. And so how can you produce those varieties during hot summer season? So we wanted to see if we could use pre-harvest supplemental lighting to improve the quality. And if it is so, then what is the best spectrum? So we conducted a series of experiments to answer this question. But before I show you the results, I would like to briefly introduce our previous studies on UVB. As you know that the UVB can enhance accumulation of phytochemicals such as anthocyanins, phenolics, and carotenoids, depending on the crop. And it can increase hardness and induce resistance to insect pests. So we conducted studies in indoor growth chambers using basil. And we have two cultivars, green basil and purple basil. And we have the two light intensity, 160, which is below the optimal, and then 224, which is the optimal from our previous another study for sweet basil. And back then we actually didn't have LED, which is 5-6 years ago. We didn't have LED, so we had to use the broadband fluorescent lamps to do this experiment, and the peak is 310 nanometers. And so this column is the control without any UVB treatment. And here is we treat the plants before harvest for 2 days, 1 hour per day, and then for 2 hours per day or 1 hour 5 days and 2 hours 5 days. So, and then if we increase the length of the radiation, then we see these kind of damages, smaller plants, shorter plants, and sick leaf, and the damaged leaf. And the damage, actually, you can see that the green basil is more severe and the purple basil is less. And if we look at the nutritional quality data, this is the antioxidant capacity. Either if you provide a 1 hour, 2 days, or 1 hour, 5 days, or 2 hour, 2 days, or 2 hour, 5 days, they all increase linearly as you increase the dosage. And for the other, all the other nutritional parameters, we see the similar trend. And then we saw the magnitude is higher when you increase the dose. But then the problem is the yield. So we did see that the yield also decreased. And the magnitude of reduction actually is also more if you add more UVB. And then green basil, it reduced more compared to purple basil. So because of this negative impact, we conducted another study using another 2 species. One is kale and the other is mustard green. And we're also using 2 varieties, green variety and red varieties in both species. And we lowered the UVB radiation dose. And for the light intensity, we used one, when actually at the lower light intensity, the impact is bigger. So this time we just wanted to use one. And then we have this half hour per day or 1 hour per day for 2 days, for 3 days. And then we see the results that we didn't see any effect on the height or leaf area or the yield in all the species, regardless of cultivar species. So that's good, at least not a reduction. And then the downside for that change is that the beneficial effect on the nutritional quality is also reduced. For example, anthocyanin we only see in green kale and red mustard. And for phenolics and flavonoid, we didn't see this positive effect except the green mustard. For the antioxidant capacity, which is the total of a lot of other nutritional quality parameters, that we actually still see the linear increase as you increase the dose, except for red mustard. So to summarize our previous UVB study, that we found that UVB can increase phytochemicals in several leafy greens. However, the response depends on the species and cultivar, and also depends on the dose, depends on the background light intensity. And then the most importantly, there's a potential risk to decrease the yield or decrease the biomass. And also there's a risk to human health, because you have to make sure that the UVB, when UVB is turned on, there's nobody inside the growth room. So because of all these things, we think then that was 3 years ago, that how about UVA? Back then, we already saw some positive report on UVA. So we talked with the engineer in Florence, but then we were told that to develop UVA at a different peak, that's gonna take a long time. And also from the engineering aspect, it is not so easy to make LED light with shorter wavelengths, which is compared to like red and blue or violet. And then so they suggest, what about using their commercially available UVA lights? So we look at their specifics of their UVA light, and we come up with this hypothesis. So using their UVA, can we increase the anthocyanin? Can we increase the phytonutrients? And can we prevent the reduction of yield, or can we expect an increase in yield? So with this question, we started our research, and here is the UVA LED lights. So this UVA LED lights with a peak of 3 nanometer, and 1/4 of the photons actually falling into the UVA, and 3/4 actually falling into the blue light range. And then we also compared with their red and blue light. So with these two commercial LED lights, we did our studies, and we have the red and blue for 2 days, UVA for 2 days, or UVA for 4 days. And instead of during the day, we also try the nights. So, and then for the intensity, we have the photon flux intensity is 171 micromoles for 12 hours, which corresponding to 7.4 mole per day. And this is the setup of our studies. Because of the space limitation, we wanted to avoid the light distribution uniformity problem. So we only use this strip that we know that we have the uniform light. So these the UV red and blue day and UV day and UV 4 days, and then this the repeat for the night treatment. So day and night, and then we use this separation, this refractive material to separate from between the treatment so that we can prevent light pollutions. We didn't use this when the lights was not turning on. So so we know we needed to do a repetition, so we actually planned the experiment back to back. And so in in September and in October, we did 2 studies in 2020. And then when we did the first one, actually we had some cloudy days, so the natural DLI is only 10.8. In the second experiment, even later in the fall, it's actually 16.5. So, and then if you look at the photo, representative photo, when we harvest, this is the control without any supplemental lighting. And then this is with supplemental lighting with red and blue for 2 days, and then red and blue for 2 nights in the UVA 2 day and UVA for 2 nights, and then UVA for 4 nights, and UVA for 4 day and 4 nights. And if we look at the data, this is the yield data, and the yellow line is the level of the control without the supplemental lighting, and this is dry mass and this is fresh mass. So you can see the fresh mass, which is the yield. So the supplemental lighting all increase the fresh weight. And for the phytochemicals, and we have the carotenoid and the cyanin and the total phenolic compounds. Again, compared to the control, almost all the treatment, the supplemental lighting increase these nutritional quality parameters. So we from this experiment, we summarize that supplemental lighting with UVA can increase pigmentation, but it is not as effective as the red and blue, and increase the fresh and dry weight in some treatment, and increase the phytonutrients. And 4 days more effective than 2 days. However, day and night treatment were not clear from this one. So we repeated the second time in the same year. And in this time, we didn't see any significant differences in yield, although some differences in the dry mass, but the trend is similar. And then for the phytonutrient parameters, and again, the magnitude compared to the first one is reduced significantly. So only some treatment showed positive results. So, and these are the photos. These are the photos of the second experiment, and apparently the color is deeper than the first one because of the high light intensity during the production cycle. And then, so the new things to find from the second experiment is following. Again, the UVA was not as effective as red and blue treatment, and we didn't see significant impact on the fresh and dry mass. And UVA was effective during the day, and then red and blue was more effective at night. So from these two, we can conclude that the pre-harvest supplemental lighting is an effective way to boost the quality of hydroponic lettuce when natural light is low. And this pre-harvest supplemental lighting is less impactful under sufficient natural light, as we saw in the second experiment. So now comes two questions that we wanted to answer. What about the white LED, the full spectrum LED is as effective as red and blue and the UVA? And then the second question is, if nighttime supplemental light is more effective than the daytime? So we wanted to answer these questions. So we conducted another 3 experiments in 2021. And in this time, we added this full spectrum. And instead of 2 days, 4 days, we just have 3 days, 3 days or 3 nights. So here is the experiment layout. So the 3-day red and blue, white, and then UVA, and then red and blue, white, and UVA at night. So we conducted 3 experiments from late January all the way to May 10 in 2021. And then we noticed that the last 3 days, when we turn on the supplemental lighting, during that 3 days, the natural light would interact with the supplemental lighting. So we show here both the average DLI during the whole cycle and the last 3 days. So the last 3 days for the first 2 experiments actually were lower, and then the final one was sunny day. So here is how the plant looked like in the control without any supplemental lighting, and then with red and blue during the day for 12 hours, and then with a 12 hour at night. And here is with the red and blue, with the UVA light. Here we add the blue because the reality is UVA plus blue. So that's why during day and during night. And as you can see that like the similar one, like the previous one, this one, and then next one is the white during the day and white during night. Seems like it is obvious during the night, it is more effective to enhance the coloration. Now, if we look at the data, here is the anthocyanin, total phenolic compounds, and the antioxidant capacity. As you can see that compared to the control or the supplemental lighting treatment for 3 days, they enhance the nutritional quality. And here I pull all the results together for the 3 experiments. So experiment 1 and 2 and then 3, and we have anthocyanin, carotenoid, and total phenolic compounds, and then total antioxidant capacity. So the dark bar, the black dark bar is the control. As you can see, for all the experiments, for all the parameters, you see significant increase of all this nutritional quality. That is for either 3 days or 3 nights. And here showing the representative photos of all these 3 studies. So from all these 2 year study, we can conclude that pre-harvest supplemental lighting improved the lettuce quality, and all the 3 LED spectrum, UVA plus blue, or red and blue, or the white LED, they are all effective as a pre-harvest supplemental lighting. And night supplemental lighting is more effective in boosting the nutritional quality and also growth. So while we were conducting these studies in the greenhouse, at the same time, we were also conducting microgreen studies in the growth chamber. And we wanted to know if adding UVA light can enhance the coloration or enhance the nutritional quality of microgreen. And since microgreen harvesting is a labelless process, and then if the microgreen is taller, then it is easier to harvest. So we wanted to know if we can enhance the far red portion to enhance the height. So we have this hypothesis or questions. So can we increase quality by adding UVA for the total cycle, production cycle at the end of the cycle? So can we increase the height and yield by increasing the far red photons? And would the far red decrease the phytochemical concentration, which we saw in our previous study in other leafy greens. We haven't done in microgreens, so we wanted to know if this is the same. And then we also wanted to know how about adding both far red and UVA? If far red is going to decrease the concentration and add far red is supposed to increase. So we wanted to know how the microgreen gonna respond to these kind of treatment. So we conducted a microgreen experiment, and here are the 8 cultivars: arugula, basil, cabbage, cilantro, kale, kohlrabi, and mizuna, and radish. So the treatments are white, which is the 2700K LED, and then white plus UVA for 12 days. The duration is 12 days. So plus white plus UVA 12 days, or white plus UVA at the end of 5 days. And white plus far red, or white plus far red plus UVA, and then white plus far red plus UVA for the last 5 days. So the DLI is 6.3 in this experiment. And here are the spectrum. So this is the white 27K spectrum, and then add UVA. Peak is here, the peak is 385, so different from our greenhouse study. And then this is the far red, the peak is 739. And then this is far red plus UVA to the white. And here is just adding the UVA for the last 5 days. And here is the last 5 days treatment. So these are the 6 treatments. And this is how the plant looked like before harvest. And if we look at the data, here is the fresh weight, and this is so the arugula, basil, and cabbage, and kohlrabi. And we see that these 3 species, basil, cabbage, and kohlrabi, actually the treatment, spectrum treatment didn't affect the yield at all. And if you look at the yield, it is obvious that it's variety dependent. And so some basil is very small, and then radish is very tall and with a high yield. And so for the spectral effect, for example, for arugula, in this experiment, we found that the white resulted in the lowest yield, but it's not all the same for the other treatment. There's a tendency that the white is lower, but in the repeated study, it's not always the same. So next one, if we look at the photo, this is arugula. You see that the letters is for the yield statistic results, so you can ignore that for now. But we look at the morphology, you can see that for the arugula with added far red, which is the bottom 3, obviously that they stretching, and added the UVA in arugula, actually, we didn't see any effect, and both on the top or on the bottom. And then for basil, we see some stretchings on the bottom compared to the top, but not as so obvious as the previous photo for arugula. So, and then for cabbage, we see some effect of UVA. You see, like this is the white, and this is white plus UVA, and UVA seems like make the small microgreen a little bit compact. And we also see the effect of far red, that they are becoming a little stretching. And this is the cilantro, and seems like cilantro is adding UVA help, but when you added far red, it seems like it didn't see the effect for the UVA. And this is kale. So, and on kohlrabi, again, we see some effect of UVA becoming a little compact, and we also see the same trend for the far red, that the plant starting to stretch. This is the Mizuna. Mizuna is relatively small from this photo non-treatment. And this is the radish. Radish is very stretching, they are very tall. So it's maybe a little difficult to see, but we did see the white also result in a little lower yield. So now if we look at the data in the height part, then you see that the arugula and cilantro and kohlrabi, with the far red added, it did show some enhance on the height. So, and then if we look at the total phenolic compounds, we see some differences here and there. Like here in cabbage, we saw white added with UVA and resulted in high total phenol contents, and same as cilantro. And then here we did not see, there's some trend. For example, this 3 is the far red added, seems like a little lower, but not all the not in other treatments. Here, there's some tendency. So, and this is total antioxidant capacity, and we saw some significant effect by the UVA in arugula and basil. So we actually repeated the study several times, and like this one, we repeated the 4 species here, but trying to find out if we can find any trend or we can answer our hypothesis. But unfortunately, we didn't see consistent results. So like here, we didn't see obvious effect of far red. Far red is supposed to enhance the height or hypercordial. It didn't. Yes. So, and then for the total antioxidant capacity, antioxidant capacity, then we see that we did see the far red effect that is lower in kale, and then in kohlrabi seems like so, but there was no significant differences between these 2 treatments. Anyway, so the conclusion is not so obvious, not consistent effect of UVA and effect on increasing the nutritional quality. So the take-home message from these microgreen studies, and although we repeated it many times, we just didn't see any consistent trend. So we would say far red increase the height and reduce the concentration of phytochemicals in some species, but not all. And there was no for UVA, there was no obvious or consistent positive effect on enhanced phytochemicals for microgreens. And then both UVA and far red effect actually is species or cultivar specific. So, and then, so from all this study, take home message, and we would suggest that if you are growing for biomass production, the purpose is for biomass, then it is not economic to use a specialized spectrum like added UVA or far red if that's gonna increase your cost. And for target the phytochemicals, in our case, we only measure the total compounds. So there may be some specific effect using different spectrums, but that would need more research. So with that, I wanted to thank my former employees, Dr. Cheston Hooks and Lin Song, who took the lead for these two projects, and the student workers. They also help with the measurement, data taking, and Dr. Hooks right now is at the University of Arizona, the CEA Center, doing teaching, and Lin is also doing teaching in urban agriculture in Collin College. So I'm very happy for both of them, landed a very good job. And I also thank my current employee, Dr. Yun Kang, who just joined our program 2 weeks ago. And we wanted to thank Florence for provided LED for our studies. So thank you so much. And with that, if there's any question I can answer, I would be happy to.
Great, thank you so much, Dr. Niu. We do have quite a few questions, so I'm just gonna get straight into those.
Okay.
The first question is, what equipment did you use to measure the intensity of UVB?
Oh, we purchased a UV meter, so we measured that.
The same question, is there a particular reason to choose 16 micromoles of UVB for lettuce?
16, oh, you mean UVB, actually, we didn't do any lettuce. We actually, that was our first study. We didn't target that level. We just purchased 2 tubes, and we thought that 1 tube would be not uniform. So we had two tubes, and then to have a uniform distribution, adding that. So I think that's how 1 tube or 2 tube, actually, I forgot. That was the fixed number of tubes that we installed in our growing shelf, and that's the intensity we got. So we just manipulated the treatment time to adjust the amount.
Thank you. How long was the UVA, UVB, and RB lights turned on during the night studies?
Oh, that was 12 hours.
Are there compound effects from lighting and temperature in these studies?
Repeat that again.
Are there compound effects from lighting and temperature in these studies?
Oh, sure. I am sure that's why we end up with, for the temperature, actually, for our greenhouse study, we actually control pretty well. So, but I know there are compound effect with the light. For example, the natural light, that's the disadvantage when we conduct the studies in a greenhouse, because we cannot predict the natural light, even though we want for this pre-harvest supplemental lighting, we have fixed the time we have to turn on those lights. Since we predicted how long these plants gonna be leached together and reach to the time that we have to harvest. So, but we do not know what about the natural light, what about the weather in the coming several weeks. So that's how end up with these different variations, and we have to conduct them many times. And I believe the base the total DLI during the whole production cycle, and also the total DLI during the time that we turn on the supplemental lighting. These are all factors that affected the results and affected the variations.
Okay. Next question. Does nighttime supplemental lighting mean end of day supplemental lighting?
We turn on 7 a.m. The 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. And then another one was 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. So it's all during the night. So basically like the plants receive, in the winter time, of course, there's between turning on the lights, there's a natural dark period, but when the day length is like in the fall, the plants probably like a full 24-hour lighting.
Did you find that nighttime supplemental lighting was more effective than daytime?
Yes, so nighttime is more effective than daytime, and we finally conclude that, yes.
All right. Next question, how did you decide on the DLI or light intensity for microgreens?
For microgreen, we wanted to make sure that we don't go too high, because that's something we know that we have conducted many pilot studies, and we know that this light intensity is sufficient for microgreen. And we also reviewed many literatures, and of course there are many literatures. Some have very high intensity, but we trying to try to do the research that gonna match the real world. Try to reduce the cost. So we wanted to target the low end for the studies.
Right. Could it be that the effects of far red light is species specific?
Yes, absolutely. And our results also show that there's a tendency, for example, at far red, you're gonna increase the leaf area, and for microgreen, because it's it's very small and very short term. When the cotyledon appeared, it's only the total length is only 12 days. So I think the far red are gonna be more effective at later stage for leaf expansion, and not because we didn't see the hypocordial effect, which means initially when they're germinating towards the cotyledon stage, there's a minimal effect for the far red, but it did show some stretching. And then the stretching, as we saw in our results, is very much species and euphorbia dependent.
Great. Next question, great presentation, thanks. Did you see or evaluate any pathogen reduction benefits in the plants or a longer shelf life?
We haven't done that since we are conducting those experiments in a relatively clean environment. We didn't encounter any passengers, but I am aware that there are some studies going on using by manipulating the spectrum. But we didn't do that.
In your final study, you mentioned repeating the study several times. In this presentation, you had presented the results relating to secondary metabolism, TEAC, for example, one replicate at a time, and noted inconsistent results. Was a pooled analysis conducted that included all of the replicates? And if so, can those results be shared?
Oh, for the microgreen, we have not actually done this analysis yet. Unfortunately, I cannot answer this question because I have not pulled all the things together. I've looked at the results for this presentation and just didn't see consistent consistent trend. That's why I say that maybe for the UVA or far red, for the microgreen, it's just not consistent.
Right. In general, what would you say is preferred by commercial growers? Compact, nutrient-dense microgreens or elongated but less nutrient-dense microgreens?
Of course, I would think for commercial producers, we would love to see that you can produce nutrient-dense microgreens. And if we can have both nutrient-dense microgreen and then taller enough, which you can harvest easily, that would be the best. And I think there are other ways to do so using different mediums. So we actually did one study so that we use the polymix instead of the Grodan. And we found that the polymix seems like it give more height. Maybe the plants grow higher. And maybe there's also the control of the moistures. So those, we just haven't done enough, but I think there are many factors contributing to the height of the microgreens. If you don't give the microgreen any stress, always keep them moisture and keep them high density, probably you can have a higher height. And also my new senior research associate, Dr. Kohn, actually have done studies using blue light. And I regret that I didn't consult with him about this, but I think I have reviewed his work when he was in University of Guelph with Dr. Yuping Zheng. And I think they did studies using blue light, and probably I will discuss with him, or you can email us, and that is one of the area we might continue our studies.
How was far red light measured?
Far red light.
Yes.
Oh, we use the spectroradiometer to measure the, so we can measure each waveband. You can set it. So that's the meter it's not an inexpensive one. This is a kind of expensive instrument for research laboratory measure that, but I'm not sure. Probably there's a meter can measure that. You can check with Apogee. Maybe there's a meter for just far red, but I'm not sure.
Okay. And just as a last kind of wrap-up question, what are your next research projects related to light spectrum?
Next ones, actually we wanted to do the far red. We are setting up an experiment. We wanted to see if what's the minimal far red percentage is needed to enhance the leaf expansion for leafy greens, not for microgreen. We're gonna use different kinds of leafy greens, and we wanted to compare with the commercially available LED, which is having 0 far red or have 5% far red, and compare with let's say other commercially available LED, full spectrum LED, and with the red and blue, because each fixture gonna have different efficiency. So we wanted to find out the solution or the most affordable light spectrum that we can enhance the expansion, enhance the yield, but not too expensive, because adding, which I was told that I have been talking to industry stakeholders that they say that maybe adding high percentage of far red are going to increase the cost of the LED. And if so, then let's find out what's the lowest percentage. And in fact, in our microgreen studies, I noticed that for the white LED, which is the 2700K, that actually has far red. So we already have at least 5% far red, and then the other 3 far red actually is added far red, which is between like 30 to 35%, which is the highest percentage so far, according to Dr. Su Yan-Zhen, who did a lot of research on far red, and she said that she didn't see any negative effect up to that range, but she also she has done many studies on far red. She did gas exchange measurement, and that far red up to 70%. But anyway, so we wanted to see if we can minimize the portion so that LED companies or LED manufacturer companies can reduce their costs, but then still provide the benefit of far red. So that's the study we are preparing in the preparation stage.
Very nice. Well, thank you so much for that excellent presentation, and thank you everyone for joining, and have a great day.
Thank you so much.